All right. Assalamu alaikum. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone who is joining us here today to this HSE and Sustainability Week with the Energy Institute Middle East, and where we're going to be focusing on COVID-19. What does it mean for the fight against the climate crisis? I'd like to just welcome everybody, and I'd like to thank the speakers who are with us here today, who will be giving some short presentations, and then we're going to have a fireside chat, a panel. During today's discussion, we'll also be providing some live feedback Mentimeter questions where you're going to be able to see basically our questions that we'll be posing to all of you out there who are joining us today. You can scan this QR code below or go to menti.com and enter this code 2815463 and participate in the audience poll. So I'll just keep this up for a minute so it gives you some guys some time to either scan this or just take note of the menti.com as I give a bit of an introduction. During today's discussion, you will not be able to pose questions live in terms of using your microphones. However, you will be able to send me in the chat direct questions, and I'll be monitoring those questions as we go along as I moderate today's session. If you want to put a question, please put your question through. And if you're going to ask a question, then ask the question. Try to avoid writing one question which contains three questions in one. And if you would like to direct the question to one of the participants here today, then please mention that you'd like that person to answer the question. We have also some questions, I'm sure, from my side that I can raise as well during the course of the event, but we'll try to give the priority to all the people who are joining us today. So again, welcome. It's a pleasure really for the Energy Institute, Middle East, to be presenting this to you, and we would like to also thank our sponsors for supporting this event. Of course, this event comes as the second day because yesterday we had the HSE Forum, similar sort of set up yesterday. Some of you might have also attended that. Hopefully, some of you also attended that yesterday. So we would like to just also highlight to you, and we'll put up a slide in a minute on this, that the Energy Institute did come up recently with a very interesting kind of survey, a big survey actually, more than 1,000 respondents, of which about 10% or more actually were from members of the Energy Institute in the Middle East, or those who were based as Energy Institute members within the Middle East area. Basically, we asked younger people, the under 35s, to really talk about what they see the future is going to be. So, of course, these are challenging times, 2020, potentially beyond. There's been a destruction demand for energy in the future. Anyway, I'll talk more about that in a minute. I would like now to just introduce, next slide, please. Oh. Can you go back, please? Yeah. Go back to is this the first question? Yeah. Next. Okay. So the first question that we posed, and some of you have already started responding to this. So how is the economic impact of this pandemic likely to affect the Middle East government's approach to climate change mitigation? So low carbon investment will be given less priority by governments, or otherwise the priority will be given only to low carbon measures which produce economic returns, or low carbon investment will be given more priority by governments. And interestingly, governments will transition their approach towards circularity and social development and reform. Very interesting. We see the results coming in. We'll just give it another half a minute or so. So please, for those who are online, you can sort of answer. So we see definitely more of on the side of low carbon investment will actually be given more priority by governments, and governments will transition their approach towards circularity, social development, and reform. Okay, so that's very interesting. Okay, thanks. The next question. Oh. All right, the next question is how is the economic impact of the pandemic likely to affect the Middle East region's energy industry's approach to climate change and mitigation? So first we were talking about the Middle East governments. Now we're talking really mainly about the energy industry. So we have answers on these questions. Okay, very good. So can we move on to the next question, please? Okay, where do you think the post-pandemic economic stimulus packages to fund a low-carbon recovery should mainly come from? So either it's from government and the taxation or whatever way the sovereign funds are funded, or from government, society at large, and the industry in general through specific fund development, or from organizations in the industries that have mostly profited from the pandemic. So this is not a loaded question, obviously. So clearly the majority of our respondents here believe that it should come from government, society at large, and the industry in general through specific fund development. So I guess looking at the mechanism moving forward to actually develop a sort of a fund. I guess after any crisis, this is typically what happens. Everybody comes together in a more collaborative way and tries to raise some funds. Okay. Well, thank you very much for that. Right. So again, just to remind you, to ask questions during this discussion, please pose questions to us in the chat box. Okay. I just would like to say a few words, and then I would like to invite Mr. Hafez Al-Assab, the project director at BAPCO modernization program. Are we okay with the slides, Francisca? So let me introduce Mr. Hafez Al-Assab. He has over 26 years of experience in the downstream oil and gas business, holds a master's in chemical engineering from Imperial College. He's a fellow of the Institute of Chemical Engineers. He's a chartered engineer and a member of the Institute of Leadership and Management in the UK. He's also been decorated with the Order of Bahrain, third class for services to the Kingdom of Bahrain. Hafez is currently the project director at the BAPCO modernization program, and he's leading the integrated project management team of the major multi-billion-dollar expansion, one of actually the biggest top 10 probably projects in the world at the moment. Upgrade the existing BAPCO refinery, which initially started, I believe, in 1936, one of the oldest refineries in the region. Prior to assuming the position, he was project director. He was general manager refining, responsible for hydrocarbon supply chain at APCO. He's also the author and co-author of several technical papers published in the industry journals, and he's also presented and chaired many discussions, many national, regional, and international conferences. Hafid is a dear friend and might not be an older brother, especially with the white hair that he pointed out to me earlier today, but he's definitely a bigger brother. So Hafid, over to you. Thank you.
Hello to everyone, and thank you for the introduction. It's good to be here again. So with my Babco hat on, we're pleased to be sponsoring these webinars yesterday and today, and I had the pleasure yesterday to chair a very interactive and beneficial webinar. And some of you probably attending today were part of that as well. And so we welcome you back. So yesterday we focused on the impact of COVID-19 on our industry, and more importantly, what we're doing about it. And I'm looking forward today to hear more of the discussion and knowledge sharing around the specific aspect of how COVID-19 may or will impact the climate change issues that we're all well aware of. But before we get going, I wanted just to take a minute to share with you the feedback from yesterday, which focused primarily on HSE aspects, and today is going to be looking at more around sustainability. But both are interlinked. And these webinars are part of a series of other webinars and interviews that will be held over the coming year and run by EI in the run-up to the main event, which will be the Middle East HSE and Sustainability Week in Q4 of 2021. So yesterday, there was a lot of discussion, and it was around resilience. We've been hit hard as an industry. This global pandemic has hit us both from an impact on the way we do business and also on the global economy and the impact that has had on our industry. And the discussions we had showed or indicated that we've had to adapt quite quickly to this new world order. But what's been very pleasing to see is within our industry, the amount of work, the effort, and the focus that has been done on keeping people safe. So yesterday's panel, we had some excellent feedback from innovators, operators, regulatory authorities. And some of the takeaways, which you may want to consider as you have your chat today, was around the words of flexibility, agility, and the need to innovate. Innovate popped up in several different discussions. And it was apparent that we've had to use new technologies to mitigate the impact of COVID-19 and to use these technologies to improve our personal and process safety protection. There was talk about facial recognition, no-touch technologies, temperature scanning, and ultimately all of this is around keeping people safe and allowing businesses to continue to operate in a different world. And that is about resilience. What was pleasing to see yesterday was several people talking about the need to ensure that we don't forget about the well-being and the stress management of our people. It's not just about getting the job done, it's about making sure that all the personal safety and well-being aspects are taken into account. And actually, we've been moving fast, probably faster than we normally move in our industry. But we now are at a stage where we probably need to take stock and document some of the work that's been done and put together the guidelines to ensure that we have alignment and consistency. And similar to this webinar is learn from each other. Similar to what we've just gone through now, we did run some polls yesterday. And one of the polls was quite apparent that life will not return to normal post-COVID. Most likely our life, our world, the way we do business will be a new hybrid, somewhere in between pre and post-COVID. And we need to understand this norm better. Our HSE management systems are going to have to be updated to be able to get in line with this new world and to prepare us for the sustainability aspects going forward. We closed out the session with a bit of a word cloud, and the big word that came out was innovate. New way to do things. And I think that applies to the discussions today as well. How do we innovate to become more sustainable? What was also very apparent is communication. We've had to communicate a lot more. There's new ways of communicating, and we've needed to ensure that those communication methods are more effective and focus on personal safety. A lot of yesterday was about the personal touch and how we need to do more about making it personal and personal specific. So really that was the feedback from yesterday. And I'm looking forward to hearing the discussions today with Wada and the rest of the panel. So thank you very much, and I hope you enjoyed today's session.
Yes, thank you very much, Hafez, and thank you both personally, and also I want to thank Babco again for sponsoring the EI Middle East HSE and Sustainability Forum. And just before I get onto the fireside chat and start introducing my colleagues here on the panel today, I just want to highlight some of the new normal issues that Hafez was talking about. Is that there has been definitely a destruction of demand. A lot of the discussions that I've been involved in the past probably 6 months have been about, okay, well, there's been a destruction of demand because of lockdowns, things like that, which has affected supply, pricing, etc. But what's going to happen in terms of sustainable changes? What's going to happen also with the reduction in pricing of oil with regards to the earlier pre-COVID times of looking at the conventionals and renewables, sort of the challenge and the balance between conventionals and renewables coming in. Is it going to slow down the renewables? Is it not? Also, the significance of, with respect to really creating a competent workforce in terms of the capacity for the future. Hafez just mentioned and highlighted the fact that we've got to become more innovative, and possibly if we move into a new hybrid world where we're using the technology a lot more, and I think obviously COVID-19 without any doubt has accelerated, stepped on the gas with regards to really the transformation, especially into digital world. And it's usually amazing that during a crisis, obviously, that is the time when human beings become a lot more innovative. So wars and crisis and pandemics and stuff like that really create that. So, but the real question here for us also in the Energy Institute Middle East is we've been talking about capacity building and working more closely with corporates and learning institutions as learning affiliates and try and drive that forward. So during today's session, we'll hear from the industry leaders on how they are taking stock as the COVID-19 pandemic evolves, and it will include discussions and case studies on what lessons can we learn from the global pandemic crisis, and how do we respond to the climate change, how will energy efficiency and renewables benefit from COVID-19, how has COVID-19 brought circularity into sharp focus, clearly from the question that was answered this morning already. There is a focus, a lot of people believe that it will bring circularity in more. Will the fight against climate change be harder to achieve, or possibly with a hybrid system, maybe actually it will be good for the environment? We don't know, but we'll hear from our panelists today. Will COVID-19 physical recovery package also accelerate or hinder the progress on climate change? And will tackling energy poverty during the COVID-19 pandemic and aspects related to carbon neutrality as well. So let me now move on. Next slide, please. Right. So let's go to a few more questions here before we move on to the panelists. Are governments who collaborated globally during the pandemic more likely to successfully tackle climate change? So yes, they will be likely to have a greater impact on climate change in the short and long term, or yes, but it will only be seen in the longer term. And no, there will be no connection between global collaboration in response to the pandemic and to climate change. It is a bit of a challenging question. So the question is really here, between the first question and the second, well, the first response and the second response, is that at what kind of rate the change is going to happen, because that's what defines the short and longer term. So interestingly, we have also someone who believes that there will be no connection. Okay, so I guess more people see it having an impact, but it's going to take a bit longer. Be a longer time. Okay, thank you very much. Next, please. Okay, I thought there was another question. Okay, so let me now start introducing our speakers today. And I'd like to first hand the floor to Ms. Mariam Al-Kubaisi. She's the head of sustainability for Etihad Airways. It's the aviation group. She heads sustainability in Etihad Aviation Group, but before that she worked as an instructor in the Department for Interdisciplinary Studies at Zaid University, where she taught environmental and natural sciences. She holds a MPhil in engineering for sustainable development from the University of Cambridge. Her research interests include water resource management, environmental policy and innovation, and technology management. Mariam also co-founded the Arab Innovation Network in 2011, a youth initiative focused on inspiring innovation solutions to environmental and health challenges in the Arab region. And as a member of the AIN, she was actively involved in the United Nations Environmental Program. Mariam, you have a few minutes, please, if you can make your presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Wallah. I'll put my Etihad hat on and I'll talk about the future airline. Pre-COVID days, the aviation industry was vilified because, or was considered one of the main perpetrators of climate change. And we acknowledged early on that the future airline should be a sustainable one. Regardless of the current crisis, sustainability and responsible climate action remains the most significant challenge facing the aviation industry. So with that in mind, Etihad set out on a decarbonization strategy. It was a three-way approach where it looked at heavy investments in sustainable aviation fuel, operational efficiencies, and carbon offsets. Even pre-COVID, and it was really mainly built on collaborations. So an element I noticed in the Mentimeter questions, we actually need industry and government to collaborate, and I'm glad that it was acknowledged by most of you that this was a necessity to see things through. So through collaboration, we managed to found the Greenliner program, which spun out of an Etihad Boeing partnership, which focused on efficient aircraft and testing new technologies in our 787 aircraft. Now, let's very quickly talk about COVID. So while our industry was hit hardest. I think it was sort of a blessing in disguise. Grounding aircraft is a costly activity. So with COVID, we grounded most of our aircraft, and that gave into more testing and more room for operational efficiencies, where we got the chance to use one of our new 787s for the eco demonstrator. Again, a collaboration with Boeing, NASA, and Safran. So again, I want to emphasize on it, or this situation, being an opportunity in disguise. I think COVID was a catalyst for us to see things through quickly, the right way. It catalyzed the green recovery for most of the organizations, specifically the aviation sector. I really think that we did, in addition to obviously sustainability, wellness was one of, and safety was one of the most important elements. So not only should we focus on making aviation greener, but it should be also a safer activity to fly people around. Now, I think also this gave us a chance to clear our name. I mean, while we were impacted the most, but air transportation has been the fastest mode of transportation, either for human aid, for aid, medicine, humans during the crisis. Etihad has operated of humanitarian flights over the past months, and we got to be one of the major role players in alleviating some of the pressures on governments through humanitarian aid. This is it in a nutshell, where I summarized Etihad's sustainability agenda and the situation with COVID. Thank you very much, Dr. Waddah. Over to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that, Mariam. I will be wait to see. No questions coming yet, but hopefully we'll get a few more questions in a minute. So next we have like to invite Martin Mamlouk, high-level advisor, perspective and stakeholder management from ENGIE, and she's also the Muscat and Secretary General of MESA. Martin is a high-level advisor, perspective on stakeholders management at ENGIE, Muscat, and Secretary General of MESA, a graduate in political sciences from the Sciences for Paris, in law from the Paris Marathon, and an alumnus from the ENA, École Nationale d'Administration. Hope that sounded good. She, try my best. She combines a diversified and long governmental experience in international affairs at bilateral, European, and multilateral level in the management of projects, evaluation of policies, and account auditing. The French Cours de Comptes. She joined ENGIE in 2017 after having served several years at the French Embassy to the UAE, where she was Deputy Permanent Representative of France to IRENA and involved in the preparation of the COP21, several climate initiatives as well. As she is also a Knight of the Legion of Honor of Farmers. So bonjour, Martin, and welcome. And, please, the floor is yours. We're about 4 or 5 minutes. Thank you.
Okay, bonjour, Dr. Waddah. Thank you very much. Thanks to you, thanks to Energy Institute to give me the opportunity to give you some insight and from the view of the energy industry. The question we have seems very simple. At the same time, it's a very tricky one. What does this mean for the fight, COVID-19, for the fight against climate crisis? In a nutshell, I would say 3 things for me. It's a waking up call. Second, it's an historical opportunity for us to seize, to change course of things. And finally, and that's the trick, it's not simple, and some specific efforts will be required. When we talk about waking up call, what is important to realize is that this crisis has triggered increased awareness about things that we certainly already knew, but that we sometimes had difficulties to take into account when it comes to the actual dimensions and the urgency of action. So why? Because globalization, we measure now that more as ever, that challenges are at planetary level, but we are indeed very interdependent. You know, we used to look at catastrophes from a regional point of view. I think this has helped us to really feel in our flesh that we are all linked together. The second aspect is we measure more as ever the fragility of our economies and societies. Like Sting sings, the earth is fragile. We felt that disruptions happen fast, extremely fast, and can be very widespread. I mean, you look at the region, it's at least minus 6.6 economic recession this year, just in the region. So the tremendous impact that things can have extremely fast at planetary level. Third aspect is that we are more aware about the change of scale of the cost of human and social economic impact. We all see what is happening. We saw no more localized crises. And finally, the crisis has triggered an increased awareness also of what is energy, water, food security issues, the importance of preparedness and our capacity of resilience. It was underlined yesterday. This is something the industry has in particular experienced during this crisis. The second point is that COVID-19 has created an opportunity to seize. We have the opportunity to rebuild better, to give priority to boost economy and employment with green investment, accelerate the transition. And we have seen a few examples. Maybe we have questions about that. Unfortunately, the proportions of the packages that we see so far that are oriented towards green investment are not sufficient, at least in my view. Second, it's an experience that allows us to measure and optimize our resources and capacity to solve the challenges. With today's tools, what happened with the vaccine is a good illustration of what science and technology can help, how they can help and provide a solution. This is something that I observed over the 10 last years in renewables. We have the tools, and this crisis makes us realize that we can solve issues. Third, we can make the most of synergy, creating collective efforts, coordinated approach. What COVID showed us is that, like for global warming, actually, the action is more as ever essential, and it involves everybody. And this means not only government, it means private sector, it means non-governmental organization, but it means also each of us, every individual. So finally, the last aspect I wanted to underline is that it is not, and it will not be simple. And we see it in the renewable energy industry. I'm just working out Mesia's Outlook report for 2021. I mean, summarizing what's happening in 2020. Obviously, renewable energy are still important. They are still dominant in terms of overwhelming in terms of new investments in energy. But what you see is that there is a slowdown. So this means that the pace of transition may be affected by this relative slowdown of investment, of the rarity of financial resources because of budgetary deficits, less fiscal and export revenues, and so on. So we still see projects, but the slowdown is definitely there. There's a slowdown of demand, on energy demand, and there's a slowdown of projects. Moreover, not all countries have same access to financing for green investment. So what we might see is the gap between countries that might be widened. not talking about still denial behavior, costs that come, some sectors will suffer more, as we've seen for aviation. What does this require? It requires very specific effort to orient fiscal rescue and recovery measures to enhance the green resilience. It requires international cooperation intensified. G20 shows it. What is happening on the front of UNFCCC conference preparation shows it also. But we really need to be very decisive on these kind of things now. We need to adjust regulatory framework and policies to create the right incentives and allow the private industry to play fully its role. So it's, in a nutshell, it's a great opportunity, but it's also a challenging situation because, as we all know, we have less money available today to do things that we want to do.
Thank you very much, Martine. And to summarize what you were saying very quickly before I move on, a few years ago, I was in Paris, actually several years ago, and there was a French gentleman who was working with us, who was with me. And in the morning, I asked for some eggs, and I asked for eggs over easy, and the garçon didn't quite understand what I meant. And then my colleague, he explained to him that I wanted the eggs over easy. And then I was asking him, because there was another colleague of mine who was saying to me, no, in the evening, and we were outside Paris, and he wanted to go to the Champs-Elysees, in the evening. So I was asking him, I knew that the traffic situation in Paris was disastrous sometimes. And I asked him, my French colleague, about how long does it take? He goes, well, I don't know really. He said, well, it could take 1 hour, could be 2 hours, could be 3 hours, He goes, this is Paris, And I said to him, really? He goes, yes, it is not over easy, So I think to your point, I don't think, and to Hafid's point also, and Mariam, I think the transition is not going to be over easy. So and the new normal, we still don't know what the new normal is. So thank you very much for that. We'll take some questions in a minute. I'll just move on quickly to Mr. Rami Osman, our third panelist. Rami Osman is the energy efficiency specialist, the Sustainable Energy Authority in Bahrain. He's an energy efficiency specialist from the United Nations Development Program, currently working in the Kingdom of Bahrain with the Sustainable Energy Authority, SEA, and the implementation of both National Energy Efficiency Action Plan and the National Renewable Energy Action Plan. He's been involved in the energy management as well as the research and development of energy conservation measures, including pilot studies for energy efficient lighting and cooling technologies. He has more than 10 years experience in energy and education and is serving on the board of the Energy Institute, very proudly with us. It's a pleasure to have him with us on the board, and currently reading energy policy at the University of Sussex. Rami is an avid proponent of sustainable development, particularly the contribution which sustainability, the sustainable energy policy can have in building equitable futures for all. So Rami, welcome, and over to you for the next 4 minutes. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Dr. Wada. I appreciate the introduction, and I'd like to thank the organizers, the wider group supporting organizing this, and the sponsors. To speak by the other panelists so far, and Dr. Wada in his introductions, that this needs to be a comprehensive approach. Sustainability is key moving forward in the response to COVID-19, and I believe strongly that energy efficiency needs to be considered in all levels of the COVID-19 responses. We've seen it included in many government responses in terms of the design of their fiscal response to COVID-19. We understand clearly that there's a huge opportunity for job creation under energy efficiency, and that the investments that are being made in energy efficiency result in jobs, reduced OPEX often. And, obviously we're aware that this is part of the benefit of investing into energy efficiency projects. We need to make sure that the data collection is comprehensive, because the data collected after energy efficiency campaigns is invaluable to decision makers moving forward. Another point I'd like to raise is, and it's been touched on, COVID-19 is our current crisis. I think we're all aware that the next, or one of the next crises is climate change. Now, we may not have foreseen COVID-19 coming on so quickly, and we've had to be very flexible in responding to it. But climate change is one that we see and we foresee. So energy efficiency has been a big part of the proactive work that is happening. It needs to be bigger. All of our responses need to be bigger. So obviously we've got massive reduction of carbon emissions that can be projected from energy efficiency. So we need to make sure that it's in the discussion at all levels, whether it's on government agendas or within organizations and industry. Obviously, there's going to be a skills gap that needs to be closed because we need to ramp up. So we need to have more professionals. That's that job creation again. But that's only one of the positive impacts. There's economic growth that can be driven. Energy efficiency is predicted to be one of the big drivers of the recovery. And it's a sustainable driver. It's something that will always continue. So I think in terms of responding to COVID-19, the whole of the world, and particularly the energy system, needs to address both COVID-19 right now and climate change as we move forward. So the investment should not be focused just on one. We need to look at investments that can work towards both. So we understand that energy is needed to maintain our economies, but also to rebuild and grow those economies. Obviously, sustainability is going to be key to building back better and being more resilient so that we're prepared for the next upset potentially. And also, the thing I'd like to highlight is that energy efficiency is something that can be improved in almost every part of every system. Even when we're doing very well, technologies improve, our understandings improve, and so it's a continuous process. That's it for my intervention right now, Dr. Wada. Back over to you.
Thank you very much, Rami. Interesting thoughts. I see questions have started now coming in. I'll address them now after the last panelist of today. So, Goviz Gonel, the Director for Country Engagement Partnerships at the IRENA. As Director of IRENA's Country Engagement Partnerships, Goviz Gonel oversees the agency's work on supporting member countries in the development and implementation of national and regional renewable energy strategies and programs through IRENA's regional initiatives, tailored country support, as well as partnership initiatives. It would be very interesting to see your perspectives and IRENA's perspectives on a region which is also very much conventionals, energy rich, and looking at very much proactively investing time and money, science into renewables. So over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Dr. Wada. I hope you're seeing me and hearing me well. It's really a great pleasure to join you today to discuss a pressing issue for the future of humanity, to fight against the looming climate crisis. And I'll be really pleased to provide IRENA's perspective on the role of energy transition as part of pandemic recovery also. As we have been all going through in the past few months, much of the world has been in shutdown due to the pandemic and rapidly devastating communities and livelihoods, and MENA region is not an exception to it. Decisions being taken to address the social and economic impacts of the crisis come along with the profound uncertainty about both the course of the pandemic and its long-term ramifications for societies across the globe. And obviously, the immediate priority remains to save lives, to bring the health emergency under control, and also alleviate hardship. But at the same time, governments are embarking on a very crucial task of devising stimulus and recovery packages, and these are at a scale to shape societies and economies for years to come. What is equally important is that this response for stimulus, through stimulus and recovery packages, must align with medium and long-term priorities. The goals set out in the UN's 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda and the Paris Climate Agreement can serve as a compass to stay on course during these disorienting times. They can help to ensure that the short-term solutions adopted in the face of the pandemic are in line with the medium and long-term development and climate goals. By accelerating renewables and making the energy transition an integral part of the wider recovery, governments have an opportunity now to foster a more prosperous, stable, inclusive, and resilient future. Here, I would like to draw your attention to IRENA's one of the most recent publications, which is about post-COVID recovery and offering an agenda for resilience, development, and equality. And this publication, this report provides also practical advice on key investment and policy decisions for crucial post-COVID recovery. In this context, in fact, we do not look at energy in isolation, but consider the energy transformation as a means to meet multiple social, economic, and environmental priorities. For instance, energy transformation brings immediate job creation benefits, a much needed boost in these times of economic uncertainty. And even within a relatively short span of time, investments in energy transformation will have created an additional 5.5 million jobs by 2023 globally. And each dollar invested in renewables would create 25 jobs. As the MENA region starts to recover from the pandemic, investments in energy transformation and also the renewable energy as the key driving force behind it should be accounted for a steady source of jobs that can help jumpstart the economies. I mean, if you look into MENA region more specifically, obviously MENA is one of the fastest growing regions in renewable energy capacity additions. And it has even witnessed a growth of more than 12% growth last year, with obviously creating a significant socioeconomic benefits. In fact, what our analysis shows that additional 1.3 million energy transition related jobs can be created in the MENA region by 2030. And energy transition is affecting obviously the conventional energy jobs and value chains. And there are possibly, expectedly, there will be losses in conventional, especially fossil fuel industry jobs in MENA, but that would be much less than the energy transition job gains. But still, there is this question that how to achieve a just and fair transition. I think it's a very essential question that we are looking into in the future. And MENA region can also build on the skilled workforce, in fact. It's already available from mature industries like construction, cable, steel, cement industries. Across these and different segments of this supply value chain, there are already established and workforce. And this can be easily used for renewable energy purposes. And in 2050, in fact, when we look at the overall job creation in MENA region, not everything, and not large part of it is coming from manufacturing. It's around 16%, but largely job creation is coming from construction and installation sector, like around 60% of it, and a quarter of it is from O&M. One last point that I want to highlight is the importance of investing in clean energy technologies, because supporting and leveraging clean energy technologies such as green hydrogen, I think this is quite a popular topic lately, that would contribute to the industrial development and employment growth in the region. For example, Morocco is currently, they have just started a collaboration with Germany in the development of 2 Power-to-X projects. We have also seen promising development in Saudi Arabia, where NEOM and Aqua Power recently announced a venture to build the largest green hydrogen and green ammonia plant in the world. And with before I stop, just one important dimension of job creation. This is about gender, because very interesting finding from our analysis is that out of the jobs created through energy transition, 32% of the jobs created in renewables, they are held by women. And this is much higher than the ability of job creation, or sorry, ability of women placement in the conventional sector, which is around 1/5 of the jobs. So let me stop here.
Thank you very much, Urbis. So we questions here. So what I'm going to do, but let me, before I just take the questions, if allow me just about 30 seconds, just to give a very quick overview brief on some of the key points that Mariam, Martin, Rami, and Gobis spoke about so far. Mariam, spoke about the important role in terms of growth and in terms of resilience management, and how the airline industry has been involved also heavily in, whilst maybe commercial and flights for business and tourism has definitely obviously dropped. But the airline industry was very important to maintain the supply chain, which was also disrupted during the COVID-19. So they played an important role in that, and recognizing that the aviation industry needs to become more sustainable, and effectively is going to become more sustainable in the years to come. And all the airline industries, not only TAP, but everyone else is looking at that. I know for sure from my work in ENOC that the aviation fuels are also looking at becoming better quality and less impactful on the environment. Martin spoke a lot about the importance of collaboration. She spoke also from a high level, I'd say the 30,000-40,000 foot perspective with regards to governments, industry collaborating. She highlighted very much the importance of technology and science, and sort of gave examples like the vaccine development and stuff like that, and the speed at which things are changing at the moment, and trying to understand and make sense of that. But she said that it's still is quite unlikely for us to be able to really know how fast we're going to be able to address everything. Rami spoke about the pandemic, but he also said that, look, pandemic, was, we didn't maybe see it coming, or we didn't sort of pay too much attention to pandemics, or we didn't think that it happened. And obviously it took everybody by some sort of surprise, and was it a question of response? And hindsight is lovely, but it's very difficult, and I think there will be a lot more resilience when we look in the future. But he mentioned the important issue about the climate change, which he said is something which is apparent. And he said that something which is real, something which we have been talking about for many, many years, since Rio in the 90s, right through to now, and really maybe not enough has been done on the climate change and management of climate change. And it was a chronic problem, and he highlighted how it's going to become, it is becoming an acute problem in many parts of the world. Some people, even some scientists I've read, have said that part of this COVID-19 issue and the changes in temperatures in the world have brought about favorable conditions for different viruses to grow in different areas at different times of the year. So, but he said that the energy management was going to be something that needs to be focused on, because it's going to really help in managing also the climate change issues. And then we ended with Mr. Gobis, who spoke about the short-term solutions to help us really transition into the future, which inshallah will be more prosperous. But he said that he stressed that this is through resilience development and investments. He spoke about some of the research that IRENA has been doing. And he said that even IRENA has been studying things now more holistically and not look at energy, and said that energy cannot be just considered in isolation. And then finally, he mentioned something which was very, very important, which is a very important discussion which we're having in the Energy Institute as well here in the Middle East and in London, regarding jobs and the opportunities that actually are going to grow, inshallah, from the changes that are happening. but it's about the competency assurance and the upskilling and maybe the repurposement of jobs as we move into the future. And he highlighted that it's important for us to really take note and understand that we do have a lot of skills, and these skills need to be redeployed more effectively. He also mentioned a subject which is quite dear to us, which is the green hydrogen and the development of green hydrogen. So I want to thank the panelists very, very much for giving their opening remarks, and I'll move now on to some of the questions that we've been asked. I'll try to look at some of the targeted questions first, and then maybe open a general thing. So ask for first, Martin. You have a question here. Said, could you please elaborate on the current gap between the measures required for a green recovery and the current economic recovery measures being implemented by the government and business? And may I ask all of my fellow panelists to put their cameras on, maybe just mute whilst the other speaker is talking. Martin, was that question clear?
Yeah, very, very clear. Very interesting question. Let me start with one observation. As Gorbers is here, using some of Irina's elements. Irina estimates that in order to achieve our objectives of limiting the growth of temperature, the increase of temperature at 2 degrees, renewable energy could, and use electrification to be correct, could deliver 70% of the job. But for that, we need to go from 25% of electricity generation from renewables or clean energy to 86% by 2050. Which means that we have to mobilize tremendous amounts, not only for renewable energy, but to adapt the grid, to enable the grid to take this additional energy and to manage the grid correctly. So just to underline that it is essential that we give fast priority to investment into green and green energy, because energy is one of the key elements of the fight against climate change. What happened when we look at the measures taken during COVID to support the economies throughout the world? In April, everybody was talking about orienting investments and packages towards sustainability, towards green, but we had only 4% of all the packages that were actually oriented towards green investment. There have been in the region, in the GCC, many measures that have been taken. Most of these measures were oriented to ensure better liquidities, relaxed monetary policy to support companies, provide cash to even to people, provide government guarantees, complement fiscal measures, injecting like 50 billion in the country's financial systems to support liquidity. Very few of that has been actually so far in green. What you have seen, yes, you have seen a certain number of projects in countries who are now engaging more and more towards the transition, but they were not linked to specific measures to face the crisis. On the other hand, you have seen some countries in the region that have put a stop or I hope opposed to the transition. Kuwait has said stopped its renewable energy projects, and we are going to focus on oil and gas. Egypt, which is quite advanced, has put a pause to a reform of its subsidy program. We know how important the removal of the subsidies to oil and gas is to ensure the competitivity renewable energy, of clean energy, because of a crisis, because of a social tension, a number of factors is put on hold. Oil and gas today is very cheap. It's obviously more difficult for other solutions to be competitive. So there are stimulus packages that obviously are oriented to enable companies to help people who are hit by these crises the most, and it's normal that you have a tension between the social need, the economical need. Like Rami said, we need to support economic growth, and the necessity not to slow down, not to stop to invest in the future. Now, Gorbis was talking about hydrogen. When I look through what happened in the region, many RFQs were postponed, some contracts were slowed down, there's still things coming out. But we see that demand for energy is down. So I'm not dreaming. I mean, in some countries like the UAE or Jordan, you are going towards a surplus of energy. I mean, how do you manage this on the grid? Okay. What I see when you talk about hydrogen, and I see the commitment that is now increasing in the region, not only Saudi Arabia, recently UAE, the Crown Prince has made very strong declarations. ADNOC is engaging. What I see is the potential for hydrogen becoming very fast competitive. The actions engaged recently by Japan are going to help. And what I see is hydrogen driving and pushing and will supporting more investment into renewable energy and all process. That might be something that could mitigate what is happening. But we have to be very realistic. This crisis creates a lot of tensions and a lot of creates pressures on the budgets of the countries. And you know, when you govern, you need also to take care of your social equilibrium, of your economic growth. So it's very difficult to reconcile what everybody today wishes. We've seen G20, everybody talks about sustainability. But the reality of the fact that we have limited and reduced financial and budgetary resources, in particular in the region, because of a drop of oil prices, because of less fiscal revenues and so on. But I'm still very pessimistic, very optimistic, because I really think we're talking technology, hydrogen is here, it's going to be the next revolution and probably help us.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Martin. I'm going to come back to this point about energy, and I'll redirect then the question to what's happening on the ground. But before that, I want to go to Mariam. I want to ask about the decarbonization and aviation's approach. Do you think, I mean, globally, I mean, not necessarily Etihad only, but what do you see is happening with regards to the decarbonization? Because there's very much a connection. A lot of companies are looking at, well, we want to continue, obviously, operating the way that we do. I've spoken to some people in the aviation to say, well, we operate the way that we do. We become more efficient. You know, our aircraft become more efficient and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, you know, the only solution is offsetting. So, Mariam, what is your view on this?
Thank you very much, Dr. Waddah. I do apologize for switching my camera off to reduce the bandwidth stress on my connection. Yes, with regards to the decarbonization strategy, again, it takes us back to the Mentimeter question about the role of governments. Now, the UAE, alongside a number of countries, have signed up to the International Civil Aviation Organization's CORSIA, which is the Carbon Offset and Reduction Scheme for International Aviation. And with CORSIA, we have a time scale basically to reduce our 2005 level emissions by 50% by 2050. As a carrier, we wanted to go a step further, and because we want to pave to pave a way for sustainability and to further demonstrate our commitment to sustainability, we set a goal to be carbon neutral by 2050. So again, we, as I mentioned, we have a three-way approach to this: carbon offsets, sustainable aviation fuel, which is in supply, but will be in limited supply if we don't develop the technologies further. Because again, with scale, these we believe that sustainable aviation fuel might be even from an economical perspective commercially viable to carriers. So we really think the role of governments is instrumental, and it's a good thing. And I'm very optimistic about CORSIA. If the UAE has committed to this, then I'm pretty sure government will back us up in that approach, whether it be in sustainable aviation fuel, operational efficiencies, or offsets. Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for a very, very clear and very structured answer. So I want to go back to the earlier issue of what's happening surrounding on the ground. I mean, Martine spoke about, and actually to Mariam's point, I mean, she spoke about the aviation industry, but generally, you know, in a place like Bahrain, small but quite energy intense, you know, you have your own challenges. How is the policy being able to address the issues of energy efficiency at the same time lowering the carbon footprint and you know, decarbonization in general, and I'm talking about in industry in general rather than maybe just one industry?
Sure. Thanks for the question. I think this comes back to many of the other points that we've touched on, and it's important that we realize that this is such an interconnected issue. In terms of on the ground, obviously policy has such an important role to play in incentivizing specific actions that we see and we deem to be appropriate when we're trying to address these issues. So for example, here in Bahrain, we've got the National Energy Efficiency Action Plan, which has 22 initiatives that address each sector of the economy, including industry. Again, how do we support industry in that sense? You know, you want to offer both sides. You know, you need the carrot and you need the stick. We need to incentivize and we need to penalize. So every country has its own mix and its own approach to doing that. But I think the important thing is, as we notice that this is an interconnected issue, we need to have a systems approach to it. So collecting data in that regard helps us to then be more flexible and address in a more agile way the issues at hand. So it can be from, you know, presenting data to the right people as the decision makers so that they have the correct information and the ability to react to changes. And also being a little bit flexible, realizing that once a policy is issued, it doesn't always go exactly the way you had expected, and you've got to be able to see the data in real time and make, you know, a little bit of rudder steer, you know, turn the policy one way or another. In terms of having, you mentioned the excess energy, I think there's this huge opportunity. I think Martine mentioned it. There's this huge opportunity here to specifically in this region where the majority or a big part of our electrical energy is going to cooling demand. And obviously that's a very seasonal issue. I think there's a huge opportunity to look at storage and then, you know, really maximizing the efficiency of our generation. We understand, you know, there's different demand curves, there's different generation curves, and certain technologies you know, are very well suited to baseline, others not so much. So we need to look, again, in a systems approach to this issue, we need to look at how we can integrate our response. Let's get some storage in and deal with the excess that exists. We can store that and use it in periods where we have higher demand. Many countries have power stations and generation capacity sitting idle for the majority of the year until the cooling demand kicks in. So we need to look at the technologies that are available, and Martin said it perfectly. We have the vaccine to this issue already. We know the tools that are in our hands. It's about applying them correctly. I hope that's good.
Yes, and safely. I mean, interestingly, I mean, I personally see, for example, the vaccines and the reluctance to take up vaccines, similar to the, some of the industries, and I mean, besides for the cost and and all those other inhibitors, but safety as such is very, very important, because it's like hydrogen. A lot of people are very scared of the uptake of hydrogen because they see that it's unsafe. But there's a very good question here from John saying, and this is really open to the panel. Maybe Verbis, we can start with you. He's saying, well, how seriously is the industry taking carbon capture and storage? An interesting question here. So maybe we'll start with you, Verbis, to take that.
I'm not sure I'm the right person to respond to carbon capture, because we don't consider carbon capture as part of energy transition.
Okay, all right, okay, no problem. I'll redirect the question then maybe to Rami. What would you say in terms of the carbon capture and storage? I mean, is this something that basically is being looked at in Bahrain?
Carbon capture and storage is, as far as I understand, it's not directly under our authority, but yes, I mean, it's part of that systems approach. We need to look at it in terms of mitigation and adaptation. It's not just one side of the coin. We need to look at all aspects. And I think in time, there will be more interest in carbon capture. At the moment, obviously, it's something that the majority of countries are exploring, looking into. But as I say, under our particular remit, it doesn't feature at the moment. I think Martin has something to add.
If I may, first of all, because this is a topic for which with the Carbon Pricing Leadership Coalition, which is one of a climate initiative that was launched in Paris, managed by World Bank and IMF. We are organizing during Abu Dhabi Sustainability Week a panel on CCS and this kind of solutions. Why? Because it is something that, that Mazar had very ambitious projects like 10 years ago. They finally ended up doing a pilot and finalizing a first project here that is now working, capturing carbon for oil and gas industry to do enhanced oil recovery. But it was... Sorry?
So you're talking
exactly.
about the Riyadh project.
Yes. At the time, obviously, the issue was that it was still very costly. Why? Because of the price of carbon that was extremely low. It's tightly related to the issue of carbon pricing. Second, there were a number of technology issues. I think things now benefit from the experience that was first led in UAE. What we have seen is an increased interest in carbon capture. Aramco, Saudi Arabia, Aramco has launched another project and is very ambitious in that. People think more and more that this will be an additional tool, because we might have somewhere to capture the carbon because we might not be able to reduce fast enough the emissions. So it is something that I see coming up, and it is something that I really see functioning once you see carbon pricing in place. And when I say carbon pricing, it's not necessarily taxing, but carbon market. But this is a topic like even 2 years ago was extremely delicate for many reasons, but you could understand. and that amazingly I see picking up in the region. And you have now in Saudi Arabia talk about a carbon market, at least people working on it. It's, you know, even our own people, when I was talking to them inside Energy about trying to promote this kind of thing, no, this is not the topic for us. It's changing. It's changing, and what Europe is doing in terms of reforming its carbon market and obviously introducing possibly some customs taxes, you know, for carbon might trigger more changes because people want to align. This is going to work if you align the policies internationally, and you have more and more countries now are adopting carbon pricing. And if this is an aligned, coordinated, concerted policy internationally, then you have no imbalance, no loss of competitivity between one country and another, one industry or another. But I see it happening. Might be optimistic, but I see it really coming in the region.
That is good. We need to be optimists. So there's another question which is actually open to the panel here to answer. Renewable energy. So the question is here: renewable energy technologies can only deliver a percentage of the energy demand. So currently, I mean, notwithstanding Martin, you did say that we might be, you know, we have a surplus or whatever. But generally, you know, as we move forward, you know, in very, you know, various places in the region, regional energy technologies can only deliver a percentage of the energy demand. So what other clean technologies do the panelists think will be required to complement the full energy demand in the world? And maybe, Gorbez, this is maybe a question that you'd like to answer.
Sure, I will be happy to answer. Obviously, I think we have observed drastic decline in the cost of renewable energy technologies in the last decade. And that is particularly true for solar and wind, which made it very competitive with existing or competing technologies. And this cost decline is continuing. I think it's not only the renewable technology cost, but also the associated other solutions related to storage and grid flexibility, etc. These costs are going down. And one, I think, clear indication of it that our latest analysis showed that investing in renewables, solar and wind, in new investments, they are fully, they produce much cheaper electricity than running the existing coal power plants. Obviously, I'm always talking about a market which is not distracted. So basically, there is a fully competitive market, isolated from subsidies and other support provided to specific technology, but it's a kind of a genuine competition provided by renewables. Obviously, renewables, as I think the question says, right, the renewables can also in the future can cover part of the energy mix, because it's clear that there are certain sectors more difficult to decarbonize. I think aviation sector is one of those. I think it was mentioned because or certain industrial sectors, the shipping sector. These are some of the examples too hard to decarbonize. So we need to look in different solutions. Different solutions, obviously, one comes up is when we look at the overall energy transition context, there are three main elements we see in it. One is renewables, second is energy efficiency, third one is electrification. So basically, the main solution is that how we can produce more electricity through renewables, and those electricity can be used to power different sectors, and how we can integrate more electricity into the heating sector, into the industry sector, into the transport sector. Obviously, as I said, I mean, even with these solutions, with the electrification, with the efficiency measures, and some of the sectors are still very difficult to decarbonize. then there comes this alternative solutions. For instance, in the aviation sector, and there's so much you can do with efficiency. There is part of it you can electrify, part of it you can perhaps use hydrogen directly. But at the end of the day, then this so-called power fuels comes into play. Basically how we describe it, those fuels, synthetic fuels, hydrogen, using synthetic fuels, and to produce those fuels, those so-called power fuels that can be used in the aviation sector. Because there is also so much you can do with biofuels. So at the end of the day, these are all about costs. Those diesel solutions are now expensive. They're not competitive with the fossil fuels. That's why there's still a need to be done in order to make more innovation, how to reduce costs.
Yes. Okay. Well, thank you very much for that. Okay, I'm cautious of time. I've tried to cover most of the questions that came back, and I thank you, Robert, also for well, closing that last stuff about the sustainable aviation fuel as well. On that, I wanna move to sort of go to the closing, and I want to go to the polling question. Yes, thank you. Right. So we've asked, and people have already come back, and we'll talk a little bit about around these things, and maybe we have a few more minutes, and I can get maybe each one of the panelists to sort of give their reflections on. So when we asked what are the three key takeaways from this webinar, is this. So let me start with the same order that we started with. Maybe actually, I know half of them have not participated on the panel, but maybe we can get your reflections on this as you know, vis-a-vis what we had yesterday with the HSE panel. You there?
Yeah, don't worry, I'll be listening in. No, I think it's interesting to see, you know, when you look at this word map, that innovation is clearly popping out again. I think I mentioned that early on. And the biggest word here is collaboration. And I think that's one of the benefits of sessions like these, and the work that's going to be done in the run-up to the forum next year. It's all about working together and making things happen. Sharing experiences, lessons learned, and figuring out how together we'll be stronger. So yeah, it seems to be popping up quite interesting there.
Yes, yes. Mariam, what would you say? What are your reflections on this? You're on mute, Mariam.
Sorry, thank you. I agree, Dr. Wallah, and I agree with Hafid's comments. It's very important to notice how collaboration and innovation stand out. Obviously, I think this desperate times call for desperate measures, and we have to be innovative about how we approach these measures, and we have to do it with I mean, collaboratively. So I'm glad that we have. We're very fortunate to have a very, very optimistic and forward-thinking audience, because I can't agree more. Thank you.
Yes, thanks, Mariam. Well, I mean, just to map this back to what we started with when we said that most people believe that the governments, you know, in their transition will focus on the circularity and social development, but the economic impact, you know, almost 80+% of the respondents, I recall, you know, spoke about, you know, the government, society at large, and industries all kind of working together. I mean, the more socialist approach would have been, well, all the companies that actually profiteered out of COVID-19, they're the ones who should pay all this cost. But people didn't say that. They said no. I mean, it still should be a sort of a collaborative approach. Rami, what's your reflections on this? So, Rami, can you hear me?
Hello?
Hello, yes. Can you hear me, Rami?
Yeah, can you hear me all right?
Yes, yes. So what's your reflections on this?
I'd like to agree actually with the last statement you just made, Dr. Wada. I think it's important that we recognize that we need to work together. The coordination is crucial. And interestingly, the audience put it the same way. When we look at who should be paying for this, I think this is something that elicits the free rider risk, right? Lots of people could put money towards it and others can benefit without putting anything towards it. It's important that we realize this is for the wider social good, and addressing these crises which affect everybody is the responsibility of everybody. So we all need to put and do our part towards this. This is why when I was talking about energy efficiency specifically, it's not just that we need to improve energy efficiency in one area, we need to improve it everywhere that we can. It will reduce operational expenditure, so it's something that we can look at as being positive, both economically, but also in terms of wider social net benefit.
Okay, well, thank you for that. That's Gorbez, what's your reflections on this? I mean, in light of what
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. In fact, I mean, I would like to take it from this question from a specific angle, because there is one angle that we have not much touched upon. That's about investment and finance. Because in investment and finance, also this collaboration or clear definition of roles of different stakeholders, I think it's important. When we look at the investments in MENA region, we see a lot of public investments, and there is still room for how we can stimulate more private investment coming in. There are still certain markets that investors see a high perception of risk. So it's a question of how we can deal with it. Of course, the main way of doing it is allocating the risks more to a party more appropriately can bear that risk. But at the end of the day, if you get there, you may end up with certain risks not covered. So there comes the risk mitigation instruments. There comes the financing scheme. So it's a key question here is, on public side, we have scarce resources. There's limited money available. So how we can use it wisely, instead of investing in renewable energy technologies, how we can use it in a kind of to stimulate private sector investment in creating right investment environment, creating risk mitigation instruments, and creating financing schemes. I think that's also one of the areas that government, private sector, and other parties should work together in a reasonable way in order to stimulate investments.
Okay, thank you. And Martin, you know, we will conclude the reflections on this. But interesting, just to ask you on the risk to opportunities, because you're the optimist. So I think the risk to opportunities, maybe, you know, what are your reflections on this?
Yeah, I would link risk to opportunities with another point there. Climate crisis remain top. The risk is that we don't learn correctly from the COVID crisis. The points that I mentioned in the introduction is that there is, we are aware that we have to face issues that can hit us very fast and be extremely costly, and it will be the case if we don't face climate change in time. So I think this is a big risk, is that we lose perspective very fast and we go back to normal. Many things are going to change, I think, after COVID, but human beings tend to not to recreate the old habits, and the old habits is not facing the necessity that we have to act fast. So opportunities is really, we are in a context where we know that in a collaborative way, governments and private sector we'll have in any case to try to boost the economy to ensure that we are back on track, that we recreate employment, that we get out of this crisis. And
Yes.
we can do it the right way, or we can do it the wrong way. You know, I do understand even the wrong way, but if we choose the wrong way, we lost perspective, and then we might end up with much bigger problems as the ones we faced during COVID.
Well, thank you for that. I want to thank all the panelists for their inputs and their response to all the questions. We are now exactly at 2:30 GST, 4 hours behind the GMT. That does conclude our webinar for today. But before we just close, I want to say one final reflection, and then I want to thank everybody. My final reflection is that, you know, one of the things that I was going through my head as someone who at the time was also heading sustainability and business operational excellence here in ENOC was, you know, I don't know if it makes sense, but the sustainability of sustainability was the thing that I was thinking about. Is sustainability as we thought pre-COVID, was it going to be the same sustainability after COVID? And then after many reflections, I realized that actually, if we had actually implemented sustainability in its holistic sense, in terms of resilience management, in terms of enterprise risk management, in terms of a future, in terms of climate change, you know, as a you know, a globally, then I think we might have. And I was trying to see that, you know, were we going to be able to manage the COVID-19 crisis even better than we did, because there was a lot of wastage. I mean, just one example. Let's not go too far. I mean, give you an example of this. This is a massive waste management problem that we are facing in 2020 and possibly into 2021, just because of the COVID crisis, and nobody cares, because, you know, this is important because we come first and then the environment comes second. And I think that it was that actually drove mankind to behave the way that we did when we started with energy. I remember when I was a kid, I was making a presentation in school. This was many years ago, obviously, but I was talking about, well, we should not have oil, we should not have this. And someone came and told me, he said, you know, son, you know, everything depends on oil. Oil depends on we depend on oil for this and that. And I didn't realize that at the time, but it was a mindset. So hopefully, I hope that the world post COVID-19 will be changing their mindset. I really want to thank very much all the panelists for taking the time today to come and speak to us and share their thoughts and ideas. It's been a pleasure being your host. I want to thank also my bigger brother, Hafid, for also being here with us today and giving his introduction reflections, and for Babco and the sponsors for really supporting the Energy Institute Middle East. All I can say is from here, I hope and pray that the world will be better 2021 and beyond. And I hope and want to wish everybody a very safe end of 2021 and prosperous 2020 and a prosperous 2021. God bless you all. Thank you, and we look forward to seeing you all soon. Thanks.